Oh, hi there. Welcome back. Episode 1, Season 2. Season 1, Episode 1 is over now. We're back. And as long as Justin remembers to turn the batteries on the mic, we'll be okay. This week we're going to go over some pinstriping. So stay tuned. I'll be right back. Like a glove. All right, what do we got here? We got a brand new Bell Bullet helmet, gloss white. Even though it's brand new, we're still gonna wipe it down with some wax and grease remover. And where is it? All right, I'm just gonna take a little wax and grease remover and just caress the top of that helmet there a little bit. All right. Presto, you're bald. First things first, we're going to determine our center line. Just going to grab some trusty 1/8 inch fine line tape. Just going to go down the center. Center is always important, so everything's nice and straight. Don't do this when you're hungover. All right, we're just gonna stripe with some royal blue. This is U10. It'll kind of be nice on the camera to see it, so that way you guys can really pick it up on the white. We just reduced it with this U00 striping reducer. We're just using just a regular MAC. I think this is just a green ferrule striping brush that I've had for a minute. We're just gonna go ahead and start paletting. The key is you wanna get it to be loaded in the brush. You don't want it to be too wet. That way it's gonna squeak out on you and be real loose. You just want it to be gently pull back once you're paletting back and forth, to have a little bit of pull. That way you know. And if you look at the brush, it's made like a sword. So the paint naturally wants to flow off the brush. For you right-handers, that's how I hold the brush. If you're left-handed, it's kind of, you guys are weird, but you got to be on the other side and hold it the other way, which I don't know how that works. And that's important, really important when you're pulling a nice straight line down the side of a car. You really want to load it up nice. When you're doing like design work like this, I tend to use a little bit less reducer. Paint's a little bit drier. If you're doing something on top of the clear, I usually use 1 shot. If I'm doing something underneath the clear, which 90% of the time I do, I just use House of Color urethanes. You can activate it and keep it on top. I just find that I use it mostly underneath the clear. So here we go. We're just going to do a couple marks just to determine our center line, just to give us some place to start. I tend to use 2 hands a lot when I'm doing design work, and then when I'm pulling a straight line, I tend to use just 1 hand. Now the symmetry is something that just comes with practice. Some people grid it, some people draw the design first and chalk it on. I'm a minimalist, so I try not to use as many things as I can, so I just try and just go for it, which is how I've always done it. So that's the way I suggest for people to practice, is not to grid it out or draw it, just put a center line and just go for it. So now that I've determined a few lines, I'm going to pull the center line off. Tend to dry a lot faster than an enamel, so you gotta always pallet it and load it up. Now you can see that we got everything pretty much centered. I'm just gonna keep going, do some freestyle stuff. So the key to doing the turn with a pinstriping brush is pretty simple. What we're doing is the brush is, once it's down on the surface, I'm just going to do it over here, so we're probably over here. Once it's on the surface, I'm going to go ahead and just start twisting the handle in my hand. So I'm actually twisting the brush. So I'm rolling the brush in my fingers. So the key to doing a turn, let's say especially when you're outlining flames, is taking the brush and actually rolling it in your fingers as you're pulling the brush along. It's kind of weird to explain, but as you're going, you're twisting the brush in your fingers to make it go into a turn. That's something that a lot of people should practice, is just taking the brush and just turning it in your fingers to make a nice curve. You can just see how, I call it getting radical, how radical the brush is getting twisted in the turn. I find that it's harder for me to do one turning into my hand. One thing that I've noticed that a lot of pinstripers that have been doing it for years don't even do this, because maybe they don't know, or maybe they weren't ever taught it, but to do a nice, so the brush itself wants to always come to a point. So it always, you start, and it always wants to come back to a point. That's just how the brush is made. It just wants to always do that. So if you want to make a nice symmetrical design, it doesn't look good when you just start from blunt like that. From blunt to the point where the brush stopped. So what you want to do is you want to take the brush, do your line, it's coming to a point, flip your brush over. So now that the brush is naturally like a sword, we're going to flip the brush over, and we're going to just end that line that we just did with a nice blunt section. So that way when we do our next line, it looks like we never even stopped. It just looks very fluid. You can see the difference. You can see that this one is, I'll do it again. So we're going to come down that, we're going to turn the brush over, bring it to a nice blunt end. Then we're just going to continue with another line. You'd be amazed when you look at a lot of people's designs, especially people starting out, is when they go from trying to connect line to line, they're going from a sharp to a blunt like that, and it just kind of looks like amateur hour. So I try not to do that. I try to make it look like I never stopped, like it's all one line. Boom. That's a basic design. We can add some more colors, we can do that, but I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to do a straight line. I'm just going to grab a piece of metal and just do how I do a straight line. So we're going to put this to the side, and we'll be right back. Okay, we got a Sportster fender that was just hanging out here at the shop. I'm going to show you how to do a line, a straight line that is. Just going to take our fine line again, determine where we want it to be. We got that determined. like I was saying earlier, I think Justin found his drink. When I do straight line stuff, I tend to make the paint a little bit more reduced just so I can pull the line a little bit longer, because you got to travel farther with the brush. So we're just going to load up the brush. I'm using orange this time, so it'll pick up on this black color better for the camera. So I'm just using that tape as a guide. And I'm just using one hand now, and I'm holding the brush a little bit differently. I'm using my ring finger and my middle finger to prop the brush up and just hold it at that steady pace as I'm pulling the line. I'm not going like this. I'm not using my pinkies. I'm going just like this. Just a long, steady line. A lot of times I leave the guideline even if I'm doing two lines next to itself. So theoretically, we're going to use the line that I just did as a guideline to do the second line next to it. Now that's from practice. You got to realize that some people do it on either side of the guideline. I tend to just do it right next to the one I just put. When you're watching the space in between your line to make sure that you have an even space in between, because anybody in their grandma can see when a line's going like this down the side of a car. So you got to make sure that not only is your line consistency the same, but the gap in between the two lines is going to stay consistent throughout your whole pulling the line down the fender or side of the car. So yeah, that's it. Basic two lines, pretty factory looking. A lot of the old FXRs and stuff had them. It's pretty simple. The only suggestion that I would make is a lot of people, when they start, they overthink. They try and do too much with their hands, and they're overthinking. You just got to get comfortable where you're at, whether it's a car or a motorcycle. You just got to be comfortable. You got to have your line locked in and just be comfortable doing it. If you're doing some awkward shape and your body's in a weird place, you're going to get a crooked line. You're going to get a shaky line. So the best thing to do is run a nice little guideline so you know where you're going, whether it's on the side of a car, on a fender, and just practice. When I first started out doing straight lines, I sucked, so I went to my local pick and pull auto parts place, and I just spent the whole day on one side of a car, line after line, wiping it off, putting one on, wiping it off, putting another one on, just practice for weekends at a time. Pretty soon, dealerships and stuff were having me come out and just do straight lines down the side of cars. So there's money to be made in doing just straight lines down the side of stuff. So it's kind of a good feather in your cap to have. See that fucking bee?
Feather in your cap?
Yeah, feather in your cap.
Feather in your cap. That's it. You don't know the expression whole lot of gang shit, but you know feather in your cap.
Yeah, I'm old. Did you see that bee? Fucker almost took me out. I was like, goddamn pterodactyl in here. Oh, if you want to join our Schultz Designs team on this, what are we calling it? Whatever series it is, just shoot us a DM on the old Instagram and see about some product placement on our YouTube series.
Or sponsorship opportunities.
Or sponsorship opportunities.
Or paid partnerships.
Paid partnerships.
Like with Doritos.
Doritos.
The chips that stay with you.
I just like Doritos. You can see how fast this stuff dries. It's already dry. I'm gonna clean my brush. I'm going home.